Hey, welcome back to the Gotham Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Evil Dungeon Master Vince. Hopefully you're doing well out there, because I know I am. Don't forget to go to gotham-database.com for my website for all the write-ups and all the things I've been doing for DC Heroes, Batman the role-playing game, and all those other things. Alright, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about villains and making them feel more alive. So, here's the thing. A lot of villains in superhero games feel dead on arrival. They have their stats, they have their powers, they're written on paper, they have their costume and how they look. Maybe you have a picture, a cool name, something like that, and they still fall flat. Why? Because a lot of the time, we build them backwards. We start with a sheet, we stack powers, we bump numbers up and down. We make sure they can survive 3 rounds with heroes, then after all that, maybe, we ask who this person actually is, and probably a lot of GMs don't. And that's kind of the weak spot, because players do not remember the numbers first. They remember the pressure the villain creates. They remember what a villain did to the world before they ever threw a punch at the villain. You know, they remember that feeling of walking into a scene and realizing somebody else already made the first move. That to me is where the villain starts. Not with stats, not with motive, and I think that matters more than people realize. If you're building a villain from the ground up, the first question is not how strong are they, it is what do they want right now. Not 10 years ago and not their whole tragic backstory. Not the 3-page origin story you wrote because you were having a fun day on Saturday night. I don't know. What do they want, and what are they trying to do before the heroes get in the way? That is the starting point I'm thinking. Maybe they want money. Maybe they want revenge. Maybe they want to prove they were right. Maybe they want to control one small block, or one small business, one gang, one frightened person. You gotta keep it tight. One motive, one direction, and one goal. Because once you know that, now the character starts to move and feel alive. Now you can predict their choices, now you can stop feeling like it's a prop and start feeling like it's an actual threat. A villain with clear motive does not stand in the warehouse waiting for the heroes to kick in the door like they're like, I don't know, a Gygaxian monster waiting in a dungeon. They're already doing something, they have a life, they have a whole thing going on, and that's the whole hook. A good villain is already doing something before the heroes show up. That part right there can fix a weak session all by itself. If the world is just sitting there waiting for the players, it feels fake, it feels flat, and it feels boring, and it feels like the villain only exists when the camera turns on. They're just an actor, and they're just waiting for their lines. You don't want that. You want the session, I said section, I don't know why, to open up with evidence. Like, you know, a witness is missing, a safe house is burned down, a gang changed hands overnight, a reporter is scared to publish a story, a shipment vanished, a crook cop suddenly just got brave. That is a villain work. That is presence, and that is the beauty of it. You don't need to have a monologue or any of that. You just need to have the villain in the room doing something. You need the shape of their actions. You need to shape their action. That's what makes players lean forward at the table, and you'll notice that. They start to ask questions. Who did this? Why now? What are we walking into? That's when the villain starts to live. Now, once you have a motive, then you can give them one strong edge. Just one. That is where I think people get a little greedy when it comes to these characters. They want a villain to do everything. They want them to fight well, escape well, manipulate, investigate, blah, 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 control the scene, counter and recounter and block and blah, 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 handle every angle. It's just too much, and honestly, it gets dull, to be honest. What you really want is one edge that changes the room the second this villain gets involved. Maybe they control the environment. Maybe they always stay one step ahead because they have some type of information or inside man. Maybe they can turn people against one another. Maybe they're fast. I don't know. Not generally dangerous, just fast enough that everything becomes harder once they commit. Maybe they never met the heroes alone, or they never meet the heroes alone, I should say. Maybe they always hit through other people first. That edge is what defines the villain at the table, not the whole sheet not the total point value, the edge, because that is what the players actually feel. If your villain's edge is control, then every scene with them should feel like controlled. If their edge is going to be speed, like we mentioned, every scene should feel like the heroes are late. If their edge is fear, then people should already be folding before the heroes even arrive. That one choice gives you a lot. It tells you how the villain acts, it tells you how they protect themselves. It tells you what kind of mess they leave behind as well. And maybe most important, it tells you how to introduce them. Because you do not introduce the villain with their full stat line by saying, hey, I'm strength 20, blah, 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 blah. You introduce them with this edge that they have. You show what damage it does. You let the heroes deal with the fallout first. That's how you build weight. So let's say your villain's edge is influence. I don't know, I'm spitballing here. Do not have the first scene be a rooftop fight. Have it be a detective who suddenly will not talk, a record that vanishes in the police department, a judge who changed his position suddenly overnight, maybe even a gang lieutenant who got released for no clear reason. Now the heroes feel it. Now they understand this person does not need to throw a punch to be dangerous. That is what makes good villain design. And it's usable. That's the key. This is not theory for theory's sake. You can use this right away. Pick one motive, pick one edge, then ask, what has already happened because of these two things? And that'll be your opening scene, and that is your first clue here. That's your first problem, and right there, before you even have touched the numbers, you already have more of a villain than a lot of people get after a full build of making a villain. The players have something to react to now. They're not staring at a sheet, they are stepping into consequences. This is where it gets good. Now here's the next part, and this matters just as much. You've got to give the villain a weakness. Yeah, you have to give him a weakness. Not a fake weakness or whatever. A real one. Not something buried in a rule interaction nobody will ever notice. Something the players can actually find out about. Something they can test, something they can use. Because if all you build is a wall, then all you have done is slow the game down into boringness. But if you build a wall or a problem with a crack in it, now the players can work it. Maybe the villain trusts the wrong person. Maybe they need access to one resource, and without their whole plan, it starts slipping. Maybe they work best in one area and lose control outside of it. Maybe the edge depends on their secrecy, and once the heroes drag them into daylight, the pressure flips. That is fun. That gives the table something to do besides trade hits back and forth, and that is when the villain starts feeling beatable without ever feeling weak. A good weakness also keeps you honest as the GM at the table, because once you know where the villain bends, you stop protecting them from their story. You stop cheating for them, and you stop making them magically ready for every possible move the players make. Instead, you let the villains be sharp in one area, and dangerous in another area, and exposed in the final area. And that feels real, and honestly, players can tell the difference. They know when a villain is tough, and they also know when a villain is just being held together by GM smoke and gum and spit. You don't want that. You want structure. So if you're building one from the ground up, jot this down. What does the villain want? What are they best at? And what are they and why are they vulnerable? And what are they vulnerable? And what is their vulnerability also? That is kind of your base. That is enough to start. Then after that, yeah, get the stats. Get into the powers, get into the attacks, defense, tricks, all that stuff that you love to do. But that comes after, because now the sheet is serving the idea of the character. The idea is not trying to survive the sheet. I think it matters more in superhero games than some people would like to admit, because comic book villains are rarely scary because they hit hard. They are scary because they force heroes into a problem. They make the city worse. They turn time against the heroes. They pull attention in 3 different directions at once. They make decisions and costs that really does cost something. That is a villain work. You can feel the difference right away. Then think about 2 openings here. One opening, the heroes hear that the bad guy is at the docks. Alright, so they head to the docks. Fight starts. Okay, that works, I guess. It's playable, it's fine, but it's thin, it's boring. Now, this opening. The heroes find out the docks are already compromised. One Union boss vanishes overnight. The police response is weirdly slow. and somebody is moving medical supplies through a route that should not even exist. Same villain, same session length, same general outcome, maybe, but now there is shape to it, there's some story to it. Now the players are pulling on threads. Now the villain has fingerprints on the city before they even appear. That is the difference between an encounter and an antagonist. And I think a lot of us, maybe because we are excited, rush past that. We want the reveal, we want the costume, we want the dramatic scene where the villain steps out of the shadows and says his evil lines. Yeah, that's fun stuff, and I like that too, but the lines land harder when the players have something already suffered because of the setup. When they have already spent 30 minutes cleaning up damage this person caused, when they already hate them a little, that is when the entrance matters. So let the villain act first. Let them take something, let them break something, let them change the situation before the hero arrives. That one move gives you momentum, and that momentum is gold in a session, especially if you're trying to keep things simple and digestible. Because here's the trick, you don't need a giant plot, you don't need 6 subplots and a board full of strings and photos. You need one villain taking one clear action that creates one clear problem. That is enough. Maybe the villain is a failed Wayne Tech scientist who wants his research back. Sound like a movie we know? Simple. His edge is that he controlled drones tied to Gotham traffic systems. Simple. His weakness is that he cannot do the field work himself because he panics when the plans break. Simple, right? Now what happens before the heroes meet him? City intersections go dead, emergency routes get rerouted, a prison transfer gets hijacked in traffic, somebody important disappears in the confusion. Look at all that. There you go. You have a villain, you have a motive, you have a first session. And none of that required a giant backstory binder to have. That is the part I really like. You can build these people fast if you focus on the right parts. And I think that often gets overlooked. Your villain should make sense at the level of your heroes. That doesn't mean power level only, it means story level. If your heroes are street level, your villain should hit the street level problems in a way that hurts. A landlord, a gang fixer, a corrupt councilman with muscle, a chem dealer with one nasty trick, a serial arsonist who knows how to pick targets. If your heroes are bigger, then the villain can widen out with them. But even then, keep the action personal. That's what sticks. Players do not just remember he had an energy blast 12. They remember the guy blackened out half the Narrows so he could steal one witness from a hospital. That's a villain. That is a move that gives the heroes something to hate and something to really want to stop. And that is another reason why motives matters so much. Motive keeps the scale focused. It stops you from building random evils. Random evil is hard to play. Specific pressure is easy to play. If a villain wants to erase evidence, then every scene points towards the evidence. If the villain wants public fear, then every move feeds fear. If the villain wants revenge, then every step should narrow towards the target. Now the table can read the pattern. Now the players can get ahead of it, or at least try to. And that creates the feeling I always wanted from a good superhero session. The feeling that the city is moving, the villain is moving, and the heroes are trying to catch up before the next bad thing happens. That is energy and is a lot more exciting than here's a stat box, roll initiative. So when you build your next villain, start low, start basic, start with the 3 lines, motive, edge, weakness. Then ask what they already did this morning before the heroes got involved. That last question is the one that opens everything up, because once you answer that, you stop thinking of the villain as something more than just waiting in pause or storage for the heroes to show up. Now they're active, now they're dangerous, now they are real enough to leave marks, and if they can leave marks before the first fight, your players are going to believe in them a whole lot faster. That's how I would build a villain from the ground up, not by chasing perfect balance, not by stuffing in every cool trick or whatever. Start with a motive, give them one strong edge, and give them a weakness players can find out about. Then let them act before the heroes ever see their face. Do that, and even a small villain can feel huge on screen or on scene. Do that, and your heroes walk into a story already in motion. And that, to me, is exactly where a good villain belongs. When the players finally meet the villain, the fight should feel like the answer to the question that has always been building all session long. Who did this, why are they doing it, and how do we stop them? And when the villain finally steps into the light, you want the table to feel that little click. Oh, it's you, huh? That is the moment that you live for. Not the stat reveals, not the power list, not the costume description. The moment when the players realize this person has been in the room the whole time through what they did. That is when a villain lands. So yeah, build them from the ground up, build them like they matter before initiative ever starts, give them a motive, give them an edge, give them a weakness. Let them move first, then when your heroes finally catch up, it feels earned. And that is where good stuff lives, because a villain should never feel like a random fight in a file waiting to happen. A villain should feel like trouble already in progress. And that's what this episode is really about, building a better villain. So tell me what you think in the comments. I'd like to know. Definitely go to Gotham-database.com. You can do it there. You can check me out on X, Gotham Database. And maybe next week we'll check out something a little bit more different at the table. Until then, make your villains active, make your heroes sweat, and make the city feel like it was in danger before page 1 of the story. See you next time. Good night, folks.